Okay, you guys ready to go ahead and get this over with? We'll do it. All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. We good? There we go. Okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. So first of all, let me say thank you to the diehards here who have stayed here to the very end. I know that over the next hour or so, we'll see folks starting to carry their boxes out the door. So I appreciate it, and I know you're skipping brunch to be here right now. So thank you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about operational tools. And what we here at Joint Force Headquarters DODIN have learned over the last year or so, and maybe some of the gaps and some of the things that we'd like to see moving forward. So my name is Colonel Mike Reeder. I am the Director of Operations at Joint Force Headquarters DODIN. I am joined here by my distinguished colleagues from the Directorate here as well. So sitting here to my left is Warrant Officer Scott Bryson, our Senior Technical Advisor, Mr. Ron Dempelwolf, our Fusion Division Deputy, Mr. Bruce Iverson, our Mission Assurance Division Chief, and Mr. Jesse Showers, our Current Operations Deputy Division Chief. And so let me just kind of start off, hopefully after 3 days here, everybody's kind of tracking Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, but just to kind of give you a little synopsis. So JFHQ-DODIN is Cyber Command, subordinate command that is tasked with the secure, operate, and defend mission set of the DODIN. And the way that we've kind of broken that out is we've divided the DODIN into 45 DODIN areas of operations, or DAOs. And so really we're a C2 headquarters that work through those 45 DAOs, and we synchronize operations across them in order to defend the DODIN. And the authorities that kind of allow us to do that is the Directive Authority for Cyberspace Operation, or DACO. And so that really gives us the ability to task those 45 commanders and directors in securing, operating, defending the DODIN, whether that's net ops or cyberspace operations, so DCO IDM. So we figure what we would do is we'll start off, we'll kind of allow each of the individuals here on the panel to introduce themselves. And so what I'd like to do is we'll start here and just move left to right. I ask that you each take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves, and then from your perspective, kind of tell us regarding the operational tools that we're currently using. What are some of the lessons learned that we've kind of ascertained over the last year or so, and then what do you see us needing moving forward? So as we have multiple industry partners here in the audience, what are some of the things that we think would be beneficial? And then we'll go through a couple questions here, and then we'll open it up, make sure we open it up here at the end to allow you to ask the panel questions as well. So Warrant Bryson, we'll start with you.
All right, sir. Thank you for the introduction. Warrant Officer Scott Bryson, USN. I've been in 29 years, so we're coming up on 30 here real short. I've been afloat, I've been ashore, I've done a bunch of combat deployments, and I am here at DODIN. My previous job was at Fleet Cyber in the N36 world. So working all DCO and IDM for all Navy terrain. I believe as Joint Forces Headquarters DODIN, excuse me, it's imperative that we look at the terrain that we have across all enclaves that we have and secure our information and see to our forces properly. The way that we could continue to partner with industry is you have a lot of tech that it takes us years to bring into service and onto terrain. So your tech is key to securing our information networks and helping our users and our war fighters to continue to exude security. So thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Ron Dempelwolf, the Operations Deputy for the Fusion Division here at JFHQ-DODIN. I spent about 8 years in the United States Army, ended up on 81 NST over there in CNMF, and after that I got out in 2020, joined DODIN shortly after that. And what we do here at the Fusion Division is we take that intelligence, whether it's from vendors, whether it's from the open source anywhere out there that we can find it, and then that sort of closed intelligence, and we mix it with the data that we have from our security appliances across the DoD, whether it's at the network layer or the host layer or a web server that's somewhere out in, owned by the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency. We have all of that data from all of those DAOs, and we turn around and we take that and create a product to better defend the DoD and our networks for that, to ensure that our warfighters, wherever they may be globally, have what they need to do their job. And I think the key part where it comes in there, as Warren Bryson here was saying, was implementing the technology that's out there, but doing it at speed is where we need help. I see a lot of great things with JA4 hashes here on the horizon, and I think implementing those very quickly can be a great boon to the DoD, is having that built into the security appliances that we have across the DoD. Bruce, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try not to knock off my name tag again. Good morning, Bruce Iverson. I'm the Mission Assurance Chief at JFHQ-DODIN. I've been at DODIN. I've been in this position at DODIN since February of this year. Prior to that, I was with JFHQ-DODIN from 2017 through February 22 in the Future Operations Division. After that, I took a year over with the 7 Signal Command at the Army, and then I was with the U.S. Cyber Command for a year there in Future Operations. Prior to all of that, I was a naval officer. I was an information warfare officer in the Navy. So as we get ready to talk about the tools that are required, I just wanted to give a little context of what we do within the Mission Assurance Division and how we use tools, and where we potentially see some focus moving forward on areas where we need to kind of improve our approve the use of the tools to be able to give us the operational picture and the battle space awareness that we need. So first off, we've been tasked in the Mission Assurance Division is to understand the elements that make up the DODIN. So what we call the DODIN terrain. So whether that's the boundary elements, the endpoint elements, cloud access points, et cetera, across the DODIN. Understand what those are. So across the 45 DAOs, they have visibility and understanding of what terrain they have, and we're trying to get insight into what that terrain is. So not just what the terrain is, but also what is the security posture of that terrain. So where is it currently postured to be able to support mission? Because of course, the DODIN doesn't exist on its own. It's not there so that we could have jobs up here. It's there to be able to support the department's missions, whether that's delivering groceries at the commissary, or it's training, recruiting soldiers into the Army, or it's war fighting for the combatant commanders. So whenever we're looking at our tools, whenever we're looking at our visibility to the network, we need to make sure that we are focused on the missions that the DODIN is supporting, and beyond that, what decisions the commander needs to make, right? So we need to have the tools to deliver the appropriate information accurately and timely to the commander to be able to support a decision to then be able to take an action, whatever that action may be. I would say that at this point, I think that across the 45 DAOs, they probably have pretty good visibility specific to endpoint. They probably have pretty good visibility and understanding of what their networks look like, as far as their security posture, what's on the network, et cetera. For us, we kind of federate that information, again, to be able to deliver that information to the commander to be able to make a decision. And where we need to focus more is to be able to consolidate that appropriate information at our operational/enterprise level, so that we have the understanding and knowledge where we could link what the security posture is through to what the mission is that's being supported to be able to help the commander. In addition, I'd offer one more thing. So traditionally, when we talk about endpoints, and we typically think about workstations and servers, but certainly the DoD defines 6 different types of endpoints. And I won't go through all those, but 2 that I think are an area that we need to focus on moving forward is having visibility and understanding of cyber physical systems. So those things like operational technology and ICS SCADA, again, kind of linked back to what missions those are supporting. as well as more broadly the Internet of Things. So what's coming onto our network that's not defined as a workstation or a server. So those are kind of areas where within our division we're going to focus on kind of moving forward to gain additional visibility and understanding. Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Jesse Shower. So as Colonel Reeder mentioned, I am the Deputy Division Chief for Current Operations under the J33. What that is I own the JDOC, which is the Joint Defense Operations Center. That is the 24/7 operating belly point for Joint Force Headquarters. So I have a team of both military, civilian, and contractors taking in all the information from all the DAOs. And as we mentioned, all of our DAOs are all these the federal DOD agencies, so your SAs, your DISAs, your armies, your air forces, all those organizations, our JDOC works with those organizations to perform DCO IDM, which is basically cybersecurity actions and defensive actions and response across the DOD, and they have to do that in a period of 0 to 8 hours. That's our focal point. I also own what's called the Mission Support Branch. So that is the back office support. So they are the team that helps cut orders in order to help facilitate those directions to those DAOs on where the threats are. How do we communicate with those DAOs, as well as providing context to things like vulnerabilities, our bug bounty program, the VDP program, providing context to what's going on with those threats, and then helping to bring that picture together and provide that up to senior leadership. When it comes from what our challenges are, again, we have a lot of different data sources, a lot of different threats. I can't focus on just one organization or just one threat. I had to focus on the whole thing, and I had to be able to bring that picture to our leadership so they can make informed decisions. So it comes down to, we have a challenge of collecting data, taking the data that we are collecting, turning that into a risk-based decision that we can then provide to our senior leadership to make informed decisions. With that, once you understand the risk, we have to be able to show what that risk is, and we also have a due diligence and a responsibility to share that risk with the other organizations, the other DAOs. So if I know that there is a threat going on in, for example, just because I'm from their Scott Air Force Base, there are many equities at Scott Air Force Base. That's not just Air Force. There's many naval facilities, there's many Army equities, and I have to be able to provide context and awareness of what's going on to those other mission partners. As that being said, that's very difficult to do in a situation where you don't always own the infrastructure, you don't always know what mission sets are out there, as well as you don't always understand the context of what's impacted by that. So being able to take multiple different, almost live, constantly changing different data sources, being able to turn that into a common operating picture, so something that kind of defines here's what the risk is, so that I can then provide that to my leadership. And I need that on a constant, near real-time basis.
Okay, hey, thanks, Jesse. And so, since you're finishing up, we'll start with you here. And as you talk about the 45 DAOs, how does Joint Force Headquarters work with other Department of Defense organizations to protect the infrastructure and to build that picture? And what are some of the concerns that you have doing this?
Yep, so leveraging our DACO authority, we have the ability to provide direction and directives to all those organizations. So we cut what are called orders. We have various different versions of those, from CTOs, which are cyber technology orders, and then we also have op orders, so operational orders, and then we have task orders. Using the leverage and the communication we have with many of our mission partners, including DISA and NSA and DIA and our various other agencies, we leverage the context they can bring to us to then provide that operational picture to the other organizations. The challenge we have is many of organizations talk at different levels of classification. So many of the DAFAs, so the defense agencies and field activities, so your DISAs and your IWTSDs, your DFAS, and those organizations are different. They talk at different classification, normally like the unclass, compared to others who talk at secret or TS only, like US Cybercom and NSA. So when you're trying to communicate with those different organizations, we as DODIN have to sometimes take something that is talked or provided a top secret classification, turn what we can at the unclass level, and then be able to divvy that out to the organization. We have to do that as quickly as possible. As well as when we're trying to bring information together, we had to bring information together from the lower classifications and funnel that up to higher level classifications. So an ability to have a a very robust and fluid cross-domain solution that can quickly take information from lower classifications to higher level classifications, given the policies that we have in place for what information that we care about, and putting that at both all three network classifications that we care about. So your NIPR, your secret, and then your TS classification, your top secret classification levels. The other challenge we have is orders are only so effective, right? So I'm not going to talk to every single organization within the DoD, right? So I'm not going to talk to the 33rd Air Force. I'm going to talk to their high-level headquarters. That's who we communicate from an Air Force perspective. I'm not going to talk to Army 7 SIG. I'm going to talk to our cyber with those actions. So what that means is, even though many of these organizations, the actual technology specialists who are actually implementing the changes, whether they be patches, whether they be configuration changes, they're not getting their direct orders from me. They're getting it from a higher level organization that we have already given that direction to. And that can take time, and it can take quite a bit of time, because many times there's 2 or 3 levels of bureaucracy and chain of command in between, and that can lead to not only degradation in being able to respond, but even sometimes just loss of the intent of the order in and of itself. Granted, also not every organization operates on a 24/7 like DODIN does, or DISA in that, for that matter. Many organizations are not 24/7. Many organizations do not operate on weekends. So when there is a threat that occurs over the weekend and we have to tell all the organizations, we also have to give context and understanding that there are some organizations that are not going to get to it until the next business day. And even then, they're going to need time to actually take the order, review it, understand what they need to do next, and then move forward. So that ability to divvy out effective communication to all the organizations at multiple different classification levels and communication, being able to share information and context in near real time is probably the greatest challenge that we have.
Yep, I would agree there, Jesse. I think if we had a better medium to deliver all of our orders through in real time, it would help speed a lot of that drag time we have, where we take an order, it gets written, and it gets put into another system, and it goes through a whole process, and then when it's time to publish that order, it gets taken out of that system, put into another system, and it goes through a series of different systems where it's not streamlined and it's not automatically going to the people that need it in any sort of automated fashion. It's a lot of hand carrying and sort of moving it around to different organizations who then have to in turn do that exact same process again. And it takes that time from time the order is cut to the time that the order is received and acknowledged and somebody's taken action. It goes from a matter of, it's never hours, it could be days to weeks depending on how it is. And that gap is just too large. It needs to become closer to that real time.
Right.
And I think I'd also offer, so on the point of getting the order out, kind of the ability to be able to consolidate what the picture looks like, I think more quickly is something that we need. So, the information takes time to get out to whoever that end consumer of those orders are, that then have to take action. But the reporting process back up to the headquarters, right, is also not an automated one. So back to kind of the endpoint discussion here, each of those 45 DAOs may have pretty good visibility into their network and what their status is. As it kind of permeates down through their organizations, especially in larger organizations like the services, they'll build a picture over time of what their compliance looks like, or their network looks like, or their posture looks like. But they have to report that back, and it's usually a manual process in which reporting that back. We don't have necessarily at our level an ability yet to be able to consolidate all of that, that picture across all 45 DAOs with some level of automation. So as they're seeing those responses come back, we're seeing them in real time. Right now, we're waiting for that chain to go the opposite direction as well and kind of build that picture for us.
Good, thanks. So, over the last 18 months, we've fielded some new capabilities. We've started using some new tools in order to allow us to be able to see the DODIN better. And so, starting with Warren Bryson, from your perspective, what are some of the lessons learned that we have with some of those new capabilities that we've brought on over the last 12 months?
Thank you, sir. Some of the new capabilities are with our partner forces, and they're tech that we didn't have previously. They're scanning capabilities that we didn't have. And what one of the vendors was able to do was, as we've said before, everybody has a different type of network and a different type of data strategy that comes out of it. But with a good partner that we work with extremely frequently, we were able to take a tool and or capability and then drop that across the DODIN, across all 45 DAOs, and get all of that data aggregated back to us in a common picture to learn of their network topologies. And once you have their network topologies, and the interesting thing is our networks change all the time. You have Internet of Things, you have expansions, you have tech debt, and the ISMs and the ISOs and the sysadmins across the services, there's probably not enough time in the day, or they carry too much tech debt. And the tool that we were able to bring on board helped us identify that. From there, they had a great data catalog and library of all of the CVEs, and being able to see that in near real time within probably a 24 to 36 hour time lag from the initial scan till we have the results back. Then we work with the DAOs to then get after those vulnerabilities or help them develop a plan of action and milestones to get rid of that tech debt, something that should have been antiquated that's still out there on a network for a network, regardless if it was a Navy architecture or Space Force or over to DFAS or DECA. So having that ability from the commercial side of the house to scan the third largest network in the world and get everything aggregated back and build that common operation picture helps us define risk and make risk calculated decisions and categorize and chronologically get after those things. So kudos to that. We also have another partner that we were able to do security validation. That is to double down and check the security validation of your appliances that you have today across your network, and being able to see that in near real time as well is huge. And once again, that targets the configuration and the control boards of your security stack and what you think your security posture is. So what that is able to do is if there is a known vulnerability or a 0 day, and we're all familiar with those, and those happen pretty frequently, we can know where you have, as a DAO, where you have that vulnerability today, and then we can help you develop a plan to get after that vulnerability in a risk calculated measure. So that's huge, and that goes across all 45 DAOs and all of their terrain. The other thing that both of those tools and capabilities have allowed us to do is to go back to that information owner and say, well, you thought that your network was this size, or this was your attack surface. And introducing this tool and capability, we're showing those ISMs and ISOs what their true attack surface is and what their vulnerabilities are, and we're helping them rack and stack their prioritization for tech refresh or network upgrade or network patching. So it's exponential. And where we can go into the future is potentially tying both of those capabilities together as one payload and one package. And so that way we're not eating up the architecture or the bandwidth that's paramount that we have, especially for S3, 4s, and 5s. So the further down you go down the food chain, bandwidth is detrimental to you. And if you're pushing large payload scans across a network, then that could impact their operational capability. So shrinking down some of those payloads would be huge going into the future.
So, and to add in what you're talking about, Ward, so some of those capabilities, not only from just providing that operational picture, but even from a compliance standpoint. So when we talk about orders, it's not just us giving out orders, it's also tracking that those orders are being done. So when you give every organization tasks, how do we validate that those tasks were completed? We have a portal that we do have a kind of, we trust but verify policy of, if you tell me you've done your job, then we will assume you've done it. But the capabilities that Bryson talked about also gives us the ability to say, okay, you told me you patched this. I'm going to pull in the latest scan that's constantly being run and actually validate, did you actually do what you told me you were able to, that you told me you said you completed. So being able to not only assess the risk, but also being able to validate that our DAOs and our mission partners are actually completing the tasks and orders that we've given out to them. That new capability that's provided to us also allows us to do that. And when it also comes from dealing with incidents and lessons learned from these incidents, so as we deal with a large cybersecurity incident and we don't want that to occur again, we can take some of the tools and capabilities that Warren Bryson talked about, say, hey, we blew this organization, they compromised this organization using this methodology, this series of steps to get into the network. We can take those steps, turn them into what's called a playbook, give that to our mission partner, and then they can automate that, and then we can run that across the organization to see if across the rest of the organization, the other organizations have the ability to either defend against that, and if they don't, where does that defense fail at? And then provide that feedback back to them as well.
I think...
And one thing I'd like to jump in and add that I missed in the first delivery is we all go through inspections, and it doesn't matter how far or how low you are on the totem pole. Everybody gets their network scanned. A team comes in and they take a look at it, and they tell you where your deficiencies are, and we all hate failures, right? Utilizing some of the tools and capabilities that we have today helps us evaluate our networks potentially on a continuous monitoring applicability. And I think that we're going to get there within the next year. And what will that do is, we all know that there's environmental drift. If we have some of these tools and capabilities that we are able to leave behind, this will potentially always alert us for that environmental drift as networks up and surge and or a new patch comes in. So having these capabilities is going to be huge going into the future, and it's going to be exciting.
I think the point that I would like to hit on there is, as you guys are talking about validating the security appliances and the posture of that, one of the things that we have learned is that while there may be a countermeasure available to protect against a CVE or a different type of threat, and it's installed, it's in there, it's in place, it's deployed on that security appliance, depending on the type of traffic and where it came from and when it went across that security appliance, the countermeasure may not fire because we don't have a solution that in real time will strip the TLS encryption off of there at the network layer, run it through the security appliance in the clear so that it can detect those threats that are already known, and then encrypt it again on the back end and send it on its way, which would help a lot of the endpoint security there. Is if we can prevent those threats from getting to the endpoint, we'll alleviate a lot of stress there. We'll have a lot less incidents going down the road.
And I think some of the other challenges we've looked at is we've seen a lot of our adversaries are going after not only the technology, but how we actually communicate. So things like how we trust our systems, how we leverage and give out privileges in regards to communication. We notice our adversaries are actually going after that trust and that methodology, which for many years we've never really invested. Like, how does a user signing a certificate, like what happens to that certificate if that certificate's lost? Can another person take that certificate, and then what else can they connect to? What else can they use that for? Can they duplicate that? Can they give that out to others? We're noticing that a lot of our adversaries are kind of going down that route of manipulating how we trust organizations, especially from a machine to application or application to user base. That level of inherent trust you usually have past the either two-factor authentication or past the password, username, password, once you've actually authorized that user. But if that session token is taken, what comes with that? How do you validate that session token is valid? How do you leverage not just zero trust technology, but zero trust methodology, that theory of trust but verify all communication across the organization. The capabilities that we're looking into are helping us to not only assess our level of trust within the organization, but also see how others and especially our adversaries are trying to use that to get into our network so that we can move and transition ourselves to more accurately defend against those threats as they come.
Okay, so thank you. So Bruce, you talked a little bit about endpoint protection. So when you say endpoint, what do you mean by endpoint visibility? And what does Joint Force Headquarters DODIN want as far as endpoint visibility? What are we looking for?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've covered a little bit already in some of the conversation, but I mean, when we're looking at endpoints, we're looking for hardware configurations, software configurations, network configurations. We're looking to try to understand where that endpoint is on the network, what function it's performing, and then beyond that, obviously, as we start to get into, and again, that kind of ties back to how can we map that to what mission it's supporting. So all of that information goes to help us to understand what function that endpoint's performing, what mission it's meeting. But then we've already talked about the vulnerability and compliance status. So as we generate these orders, as we go out and we push out requirements to go out and harden the terrain, to go out and increase the security posture, when we're looking for the data to come back up, is to be able to have that visibility, the understanding of whether those endpoints are now meeting that new baseline security requirement that we've established for it. And again, Ron made a great point. This is not, I'm talking a little bit about endpoint here, but really, as I kind of started off with in mission assurance, it's not one piece or another piece. It's the whole, it's all the levels of the DODIN that we need to take a look at to be able to have that visibility on, to be able to have the picture of, to be able to provide that protection. So while we want to have visibility in endpoint, we want to understand what the security baseline of the endpoint is, really that's just one part of the picture. There are layers across the DODIN in which we also want to have visibility. We also want to be able to establish those baseline security requirements to give those layers of protection ahead of somebody being able to reach our endpoints. I'd also say broadly, moving off of the kind of the endpoint, when we're talking about kind of managing the data, there's an entire kind of process to this as well, right? So it's not just a tool being able to provide us a picture or a status of what the what an element looks like, what an endpoint looks like, but we've got to get that data. We then have to turn that into some sort of information, knowledge and understanding for us, some sort of insight to understand, again, what's that status, how's it tied to the mission, why is that important to us, and then be able to drive an action off of it. So really, there's a lot of picture that has to be put together to be able to inform that final decision point of what action we need to be able to take. So.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask you each the same question here. So I'm going to give you a second to think about it. So I'm going to ask you, from your perspective, so we've talked a little bit about the operational tools that we're using now. We've kind of woven in some of the things we'd like to see. But from your perspective, what is the biggest challenge that we currently face? And where could industry help us the most as we look as a command and control headquarters, trying to see the entirety of the DODIN and to take defensive action on it? So while you think about that, I think really two points that we've kind of brought up so far, and you've heard it a lot here over the last week, battle space awareness, right? So the cyberspace domain is really no different than any other domain. Those DAO commanders and directors need to be able to see their terrain, their networks, and need to be able to understand those networks so that they are able to make decisions based off risk. The second thing that is kind of teased out here is how do we move faster? How do we automate defensive actions? How do we automate potentially direction out to the DAOs, or at least how do we make that faster so that those commanders and directors can quickly defend their terrain when we see adversary threats? So with that, Warren, I'll start with you because you look like you've stopped writing at this point. And so I ask you, from your perspective, what is really our biggest challenge, and where can the industry help us?
Sir, great question. So as we take a look around, I mean, there's over 100 plus vendors here. and I would say that they're integrated across the .gov writ large. How much is their data within their technology, within their appliances, is shareable or able to be ingested to develop that common operation picture? And then take 4 or 5 of those same type of vendors, and everybody has their own little segment of how things are going to flow and what that information and what that data looks like. Unfortunately, and maybe I have my blinders on, but I haven't seen one company come in and say, you know what, we can aggregate all of the data from all of the different vendors. I think that that would be a huge change because as you look across our DAOs, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and then all of the agencies, everybody has a different budget for their infrastructure, for their network. Not everybody has, and not everyone invests that same dollar amount across the DAOs. And to some of our DAOs, security of their network really isn't that big of a concern because they're worried about a logistics or they're worried about something completely different. So if we had an industry partner that would baseline and aggregate all of the different data from all of the different vendors, that would be a huge game changer going into the future. What would that be able to do? That would be able to, instead of having to buy 5 different types of appliances from a vendor on aisle A, B, or C, and be able to buy one item that would paint the picture better for us, because like I said, not everybody has the same type of budgets, and not all of that money gets allocated to go to that budget. Some could go to a baseball field, you never know. So I would definitely say industry, I would love to see someone take all of a security appliance or a technology and then make the data available as one whole silo.
Okay. Ron?
All right. I'm in the same mind here with Warren Bryson, and I think what that solution actually looks like as the user interacts with it is all of that data is fed in a layered format where they're all different streams, and you can choose what do you want to see. Do I want to look at the threat alerts from a specific vendor that fired on this area? Do I want to look at the circuits, the physical hardware that's there that comes from the DOD's held data? Do I want to look at what are the planned outages and have all of that together in that common picture so that when something does occur, you know whose missions are there in that location immediately in real time. You know who to call and who to send the order to. You know what appliances are there. You know what countermeasures are or aren't available. And you know if they worked or they didn't. You don't have to spend days trying to figure all of that out. That'll cut a lot of that time down where you can deliver something in real time, and you can also share that between our 45 different DAOs. There shouldn't be a reason that we can't have that picture and share it with all of them so they all have a great understanding of what is the DODIN, what does it look like, what is it in reality across cloud, mobile, the Internet of Things, the IT, the OT, the traditional networks and the non-traditional networks. We need to be able to look at all of it and take actions based off of what's there in real time. And it needs to be the flavor that DCMA wants, the flavor that the Missile Defense Agency needs, the flavor that DODIN would use. I think that's the big point, and it does need to aggregate everything together into one.
All right, thanks. So I'll probably say the same thing in just a slightly different way, but I think we're all seeing the same.
He's better with words.
So acknowledge the same issues and challenges, but what I'll kind of put it back in, I've talked about it a couple times, is really being able to link back to mission. So the biggest challenge I see in the mission assurance division that we have is, again, there's a lot of silos of information, whether that's, and again, you know, kind of the DoD over time has recognized, you know, small issues that it needs to resolve. So it'll start to collect data into, you know, little silos of information, right? So we may have what the picture of a network looks like. We may have, you know, what the, you know, baseline security looks like on those elements. What our missions are and how those are linked. But those, and then on top of that is assessments. We do assessments all the time. We have lots of information that's out there on what our network looks like from those assessments. But those assessments are in different places. So we have all this information that sits in all of these different silos. And the challenge I have is, again, from mission assurance, is being able to link that back to our missions, right? So we understand what our missions are. We understand, potentially what networks are supporting those missions. But again, I don't have an understanding of what appliances or specific, endpoints are linked to those networks that are supporting those missions. And then we have kind of assessment criteria that exists out there that's gone in and said, hey, here's what the baseline looks like, or here's where we've got trends or issues that need to be confronted, and those sit somewhere else. So right now it's a very manual process to go through and pull that picture together of, okay, what issues are we confronting that we're seeing through our assessments? Where do those appliances exist on the network? And then how does that part of the network support our mission? And right now, having some challenges in being able to put that picture together.
Yeah, so I think you kind of heard like a common theme, right? There's a data issue, right? And DODIN's not unique to that. I will say, to kind of add a little twist to it, it's more of the automation of data. I think we have access to all the data, right? I can go to these DAOs and get the data that I need, but I don't know what to do with the data once I have it. Or I have it and I can't do anything with it because it's not in a format that I can make and talk with other data sets that I already own. As Bruce talked about, they're in different data silos. As I talked about in my first little spiel there, right? And different classifications. How do I take data that's at the unclass level and bring it up to the secret or the TS level? Or how do I take TS information and then bring it down to lower levels for other organizations? And then how do I bring all that together to provide that battle space awareness? The idea is, again, we're trying to provide a real life, here's where the risk is, here's where the threats are. And not only how do we identify what that threat is, but how do we respond to that, right? There's a couple theories probably heard of, like moving target defense. Like, how do I make myself a harder target? Because defense has primarily been a wait and see what happens and then respond when something happens. We want to get more ahead of that. How do we get into the behavioral heuristics of response? How do we identify trends and how do we respond to those trends? How do we identify where they're going to next? Not just what they hit, but what are the data they're actually looking for? And then how do I identify that? And then how do I protect that going forward? So that predictive analysis, that predictive defense, being able to take and automate a lot of those different processes that we have to bring the data together, I think is where our real challenge is. We have this data, we need to bring it together, and right now the only way to bring it together is through a series of very manual processes that makes it impossible to actually give an effective response. So we can find ways to not only bring the data together, but to automate those processes for not only aggregating it, but also bringing it at different classification levels. I think we'll be in a much better spot, and we're providing that cybersecurity situational awareness.
Great. Hey, thanks, Jesse. So, hey, great job, gentlemen. So before I open up for questions, and you do by no way have to answer this, but is there something I should have asked, or is there something else that you wanted to say before we turn it over for questions? Like I said, not required.
That's not a loaded question.
Okay,
That's right.
That's good. All right, that's fine. I just want to make sure I gave you the opportunity. Okay, so they have nothing further to say, so we'll open it up for questions at this point. If there's any questions here from the audience, just ask that you please go to the microphone.
So I'll also bring up another thing. So also, not only CONUS, but I see one of our 5i partners is here. So our ability to work with our 5i partners, our partners overseas is also important to us. So bring data from those partners at different classification levels is also important to us. How do we bring in our UK partners, our Canadian partners, our NATO allies? How do we bring all their information together as well?
What's funny is you looked right at Australia and didn't even say Australia, but that's okay.
I thought he was obvious.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Tyrone Hurley Jr. I am one of the ISSMs in the newly established J4 of DISA. One of the topics that was mentioned by the panel was finding more or better ways for automated data to better analyze and analyze, assess, and respond. One of the challenges that I see within that, especially coming from our partners, our vendors, everyone has their own technology or their own way to assist. And of course, many companies are protective of that, but we are still dealing with this silo of data. My thought to that is, while I understand folks are protective of the data, it would be better if we could have somewhat of a network aspect where if we have multiple entities that are looking in the compiled data and able to pull what they need, and if we could get that in a unified dashboard where if we have, just throwing names up there, if we have something from NetScout that's assessing packages, if we have something from ByLight, if we have something from another company that's actually going in, looking at the data, and we can pull exactly what we need for each aspect of where you cover, that would be something that I think would help. That way, companies in this competitive environment can still have protection over their properties, but at the same time contribute, because they all want to contribute to the same thing, which is supporting the warfighter from a cyber workspace. So, but my question is, on your opinion, as we are the folks that look at this data and have to do the assessment, and you're expressing the challenges, how do we relay that message, or how do we talk to our vendors, or maybe getting them to talk to each other so that they can provide that kind of service where when they're looking at the data, or they can bring their technology to look at the data and maybe have it in a way that's easy and comprehensive so that you can pull what you need from each aspect of where you work and be able to provide that real-time response? That's my question.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. All right, great question. I like how you capitalize and you had said that, there's intellectual property. And everybody here in all the different rows, everybody has intellectual property, but if you notice, a reoccurring theme for all of us as panel members is there isn't a one technology, one ask, one box type solution that helps us aggregate that data, because each of the companies here, and I understand it, but at the end of the day, I think that if we continue to silo off our information, and I'm not saying information share, but I think that there should probably be a vendor that can holistically keep everything separate for the intellectual property, but also be able to share that or dissect that to develop that common operating procedure. And whoever comes up with that tech is going to be a bajillionaire. But if that is ever capable, that will help and silo it out. But that's also trusted partnerships. And I don't think that we have enough trusted partnerships in industry right now today. Moving into the future, I hope that that actually happens. Anybody else have anything on that?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on Warren Bryce says, it comes down to transparency, not only from us, but also from the vendor to the level that makes sense, right? I understand intellectual property is a concern, but for us, there needs to be a level of transparency so that we can help work with you guys and work with the vendors and our mission partners to help us accomplish that mission.
Agreed. From my perspective, the baseline on all of this is the data.
Yes.
So if we did, like you said, if we had a tool where all these partners we have bring in their intellectual properties and provide what they can. I'm sorry, can you not hear me? Sorry, I'll speak up.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was that far away from the microphone. So I look at it as the common denominator amongst this is better assessment of the data or the data itself.
Correct.
So while I know they're going to protect their intellectual properties, they're all trying to access this data to provide a service to us. That's kind of the baseline. So while we have the multiple silos of data, which is unfortunate what we're trying to correct, I think it would be good if, like you said, if someone was able to do a central hub that these partners can tap into to look at the data and provide that stuff, and maybe have a central hub where it's comprehensive and you can get where each folks can get what they need out of it. I think, like you said, they would be a billionaire plus.
Well, and the other thing that I'd like to capitalize real quick on that is, if we had partners out in the audience that wanted to do that, I mean, we have standalone labs. And if we could do a bake-off in that type of environment, so that way everybody is still truncated out without the intellectual property loss, and then we just see where it goes from there and who would jump on board to help.
Totally agree. Thank you. I'm just using you all to kind of get that out there. Hopefully they're listening. Thanks.
Appreciate it, Ty.
Thanks.
Here comes trouble.
Nope, no questions from this guy.
Next question.
Good morning. My name is Major Ryan Shenko, a U.S. Army amateur cybersecurity enthusiast. Colonel Reeder, thank you for hosting the panel today, and panel members, thank you for your participation. Warren Bryson, you brought up a good point earlier as you were answering the question from Colonel Reeder, as far as what capability do you wish you had the most that you don't have? But listening to the other panel members, there might be some other .mil PF solutions that are out there that could be complementary. For instance, a policy solution. So I'd like to pose that same question to the panel members and Colonel Reeder too, if you have something you want to chime in. Is there a policy or any of the other letters that you want to pick from? If you had one genie in the lamp that you could get a wish that you could only use to apply for Secure, Operate, Defend.
Major, great question. Holy smokes. I mean, you're about to open up Pandora's box. I would definitely say that policy needs to be adjusted. Sorry, sir.
No, you're good. Clean up after.
As networks come online, as different DAOs operate their terrain, I don't think that there is enough policy or swim lane guidance provided for those information networks to be developed on. As I said before, not everybody has an unlimited budget for their networks and or policy, but I think that there should be siloed out, and not by level of your importance as an individual DAO, because some of them might think that they're super duper important, and I'm not saying that they're not, but in an operational aspect, not everyone has a warfighting platform and or a shooting capability. But if we siloed off what is allowed on a network a little bit better at the Pentagon level, I think that we would have a stronger policy, and we would also be able to have the checks and balances to understand what some of those network owners are allowing on their network. And then that goes back to the sensor and network data strategy that we had talked about across the entire panel. So I would definitely say that the budgetary and policy that enforces and allows the agencies to operate would be hugely beneficial, and it would help the local network defenders better their job. So, great question. Thanks, Major.
So, yeah, I'll chime in there too as well. So, 'cause we really didn't talk about policy. What I will say, and open for debate here, but I would argue that in the last 12 months, the relationship between the DOD, CIO, U.S. Cyber Command, Joint Force Headquarters, DODIN has improved leaps and bounds. Not perfect yet, but it has improved. I think historically that policy has been going this direction. Operationally, with Cyber Command, Joint Force Headquarters, DODIN, we may have gone a different direction, or at least not been completely aligned. I would argue now that we are in a better place than we've ever been as far as trying to align the strategies that are coming out, the policy that's that is coming out of the DoD CIO, along with the operational guidance from U.S. Cyber Command and Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, ensuring that what we're requesting, what we need for the Secure, Operate, and Defend, the operational requirements, and what's coming out in policy is aligned. I don't think we're completely there yet, but I've seen vast improvements, and we're moving in the right direction. And so, as we talk endpoint protection today, we didn't bring up logging, but I would argue that probably one of the most critical things that any network owner can be doing right now, and it's come up in some of the other discussions here over the last few days. End of life in a service equipment and getting that replaced, sensor strategies, cloud strategies. All of these are areas that historically the CIO may have been doing, creating policies on. Cyber Command may not have necessarily been that aligned. I think we are a lot closer now than we have been. offer anyone to disagree or?
No, again, I've just come back in February from being here being away for 2 years, and I would say that from my position in my division, I think there's a much tighter relationship with DOD CIO than when I departed. I think that there is a lot more conversation. We are starting to be included more into the discussions and meetings in driving the policy changes. I would offer that if Major Chenko left it open to choose any one of the .mil PFP letters, so I'll toss another one out there. I'll go with doctrine, and I'll say while we're coming along and kind of moving policy and operations, DoD CIO policy and operations and our operations closer together, I think what kind of drives all of this, or a lot of this, is process, right? Making sure that we have the processes in place to be able to say how it is we're going to pull the, where the data needs to go, what information needs to be there, generating our techniques, tactics, techniques, and procedures to be able to capture all of that. And I think we have a bit of a challenge in getting that all written down in doctrine that then gets out to all of the 45 DAOs that are then, again, that we're federating our mission across to make sure that we're all operating from the same kind of play sheet. So that's to go back to the original question. I'll pitch that one out there. But thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one. Once, twice. Okay. Hey, listen, again, thank you so much for coming. I know last day in the middle of brunch, but I appreciate you taking time to come out. And thanks to AFCEA International for giving us the opportunity to get up here and pontificate for 50 minutes or so. So everyone have a great day and safe travels home. Thanks.